And we are live. Welcome everyone to Not Financial Advice, NFA Live, episode number, I think we're in the 40s now. I am joined as ever by Rob from Digital Asset News and Ben from Into the Cryptoverse. Let me just share my screen and you can see their pages there. If you're not already subscribed to Rob and Ben, then what are you waiting for? There's also Ben has also got an excellent website, Into the Cryptoverse Premium, which I believe, Rob, is where you get all your information from.
It's where I steal all the great information and share it with my subscribers. Yes, exactly.
Steal. Okay. So thanks for joining again, guys. Let me just stop sharing my screen there. So I've a few things I thought we could talk about today. I'm just mixing up. I think that's better. I thought we'd talk about Bitcoin ETFs. Just touch on those sort of briefly. I want to get your thoughts on whether this is a bear market rally or whether we are in the bull market now. Can we truly get excited? I'm curious to know what narratives are on your radar. If there are any specific projects you're watching. On that note, Rob, I have a bone to pick with you about Flappy Bird, but we'll get to that. And I just want to very quickly, now I know talking about politics is even more toxic than talking about Bitcoin SV, but I do want to just briefly touch on a few goings on in the US briefly, because I think it's very relevant to crypto. But yeah, and then everyone watching, thank you for joining. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions that you would like to ask Rob, Ben, or dare I say it myself, then please do put them in the comments. And as we go along, I'll try and pick out the best ones. And then towards the end of the stream, we'll endeavor to answer a few of them for you. Okay, I think that is all the housekeeping. How are you guys doing, by the way? Sorry, I've just waffled on. How are you guys? How are you guys holding up?
Pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, it seems like things have kind of quieted down since this ETF, but yeah, not too bad.
Yeah, it's kind of nice, isn't it? I think like after that sort of mania, after that, rampant sort of just build up to it. It's kind of nice just to be able to kick back a little bit and just sort of forget that and start thinking about the next thing, of which there are many, which we might, in fact, one of which we'll talk about now. I think I want to the next big thing for Bitcoin, at any rate, now that the ETFs, the spot ETFs, have been approved, is the halving, which is due in April. And as the question says, I think this is probably as hotly anticipated as the Bitcoin ETFs were this year. So my question to you guys is this going to be another sell the news event? Like, I think it's fair to say the ETFs were, but maybe you guys think differently on that. So Bitcoin halving, sell the news. What do you think, Rob? Do you want to start us off?
There, I was muted. Sorry. Yeah. So to sell the news or to not for the ETF, I know. I mean, everybody was expecting a little bit different, and I think we talked about this in the show previously, where we said, look, these things could be a big jump or it could be a long slog, and that's pretty much what it is. I know a lot of people would say, well, there's a lot of activity, but so far as like with the Bitcoin ETF, I'm going to share my screen. Guy, if you could help me out here. Mm-hmm. And like I said in the beginning, I steal everything from Ben's website. Not the great stuff, but just the good enough stuff. And when I was taking a look at it to answer this question, everybody talks about there's going to be a supply shock. There's going to be a supply shock. Of course, because this is a spot ETF, the 9 different players in the game, the BlackRocks, the Fidelities, they have to actually hold or purchase that Bitcoin and put it somewhere. And a lot of these individuals or institutions are actually taking this and they're taking it off the exchanges and holding it. But when we take a look at it, I mean, just across since June or so, I mean, I'm just doing this by percentage of total supply. Ben, correct me here if I'm wrong here, but we're talking like supply held by exchanges. And I've got Poloniex, Huobi, Bitstamp, BitMEX, Kraken, Bittrex, Bitfinex, Gemini, Binance, essentially the big players in the game. And it's really been essentially flat. It's not like there is a ton of movement. And then if I can take a look at like the supply flow, for this one, I could only get up to January 1st. So I expect there's a little bit of a negativity. But if I just take a look, this was a tweet from Eric Balchunas, who I thought would be totally wrong in the ETF. Let's be clear about that. I did not think this was going to actually go through. And I was wrong, and I had to wear that ridiculous T-shirt on with Simon Dixon. But if we take a look at the flows so far for the different spot ETFs, I mean, we're still in the positive, but it hasn't been stupendously great. And the reason is because of grayscale. So now people will say like, well, it's a buy the rumor, sell the news. In my personal opinion, I mean, could it have been better? Yes. But are we accelerating? Yeah. We're actually, people are getting out of grayscale. They're putting it into their different ETFs that they want to go through because for various reasons. So I think, I mean, this is, I just look at it as a long-term play. And if we've all been waiting for the same thing, which is, we're looking for universal adoption and mass adoption. If we did all this work, why do you want to sell at this point? I can't give you financial advice, but I still look at these numbers and go, well, we're increasing in here, so I can get behind that. Now, as far as like an ETH ETF, I don't know. I'm going to leave this one up to Ben, but this is what I see, and I think we're going in the right direction at least.
Great. Ben, can I sort of add, before I get your take on it as well, can I kind of add something to the question too? Because I think the halving, someone pointed out to me today that I think it was on our Discord actually, that the response from, if you like, the sort of mainstream financial media or the mainstream media in general, the response to the spot ETF applications has been pretty muted. Like obviously everyone's in crypto has been going crazy about it, but it doesn't seem to have made much of an impact on the wider world. So the thing I want to add to my sort of general question about the halving being priced in is, do you think that the halving is the opportunity for, it could be the moment where sort of the wider world sort of wakes up to it again and goes, and Bitcoin sort of comes back into the headlines? It's a sort of two-parter, if you like.
Yeah, no, I mean, the halving historically, people always ask, is it priced in, right? It's sort of the age-old question that we go through each cycle. I think like if an event is known, it's hard to say that it's not priced in to some degree. But I mean, again, that doesn't mean that price can't go up after that event, right? It could just be other things. Like if you think last cycle we had the halving, after the halving, Bitcoin didn't really do anything for 3 or 4 months, right? And then, half a year later, we had, all this money being printed, just ongoing. We had not only that, we also had, MicroStrategy coming in and buying up. We had a country for at some point. So I feel like that's the stuff that's not priced in, right? The halving sort of raises awareness, I think. So it's hard for me to look at an event that we know the outcome and say that it's not priced in. It's like it's sort of like how people say, well, if the news doesn't matter because by the time you hear about the news, it was priced in, long ago. So I think in terms of that regard, it probably won't have a huge impact. In fact, like the daily transfer volume of Bitcoin, I think is, would far surpass the issuance. And so it's hard to think that, let's put it this way. Like I could see it being something similar to what we just had with the spot ETF, right? Where like there's a lot of hype going into it and maybe even price rallies into it, right? But afterwards, you get kind of another situation like this where we're like, all right, now what? So that's probably the most likely outcome. Oftentimes, when you look at halvings, actually, let me see if I can find a chart before I even share my screen because I don't even know if I think I have the chart. Yeah, so here, let me share my screen. All right, can you see that? Yeah, so this is the ROI of Bitcoin after the halving. So you have cycle 1, cycle 2, and cycle 3. So the blue line is after the 2012 halving. And then you have the last couple of halvings as well. And after the first halving, I mean, you can see price was relatively flat for about 2 months, and then it went up. But the 2 halvings after that, so 2016 and 2020, price was relatively flat for about 6 months or so before we had a true surge. So I could see something similar to like that happening where there's a lot of hype. Again, this market has been very much focused on narratives. If you think about like the merge and how Ethereum surged into that, if we think about the spot ETF and how Bitcoin surged into that, you also, of course, have the halving. So I think it could be one of those things where it behaves in a similar manner as a spot ETF. And then afterwards, we're then like, all right, well, now what is the next thing we focus on? And then it tends to be, all the things over here that come, out in like late 2024 throughout 2025. Those are probably the things that are not priced in. And I mean, historically, those have been good things that have not been priced in. So I think those are my general thoughts on the halving and whether it's priced in or not. My general thought is if you know about it, it's hard to say that it's not priced in to some degree.
Yeah. And I guess it kind of ties into the fact just how aware is the wider non-crypto muggle world, whatever you want to call it. Is this something that is going to impact on them? Because I do remember that from last cycle. I do remember the last halving, seeing quite a lot of attention about that in the press. And I think I've said this before, because I think this is something that's fairly easy for most people to understand. most people have a rudimentary grasp of the nature of supply and demand. And that was an easy, it's kind of easy story to tell, isn't it? You've got this magic internet money, and it's programmed so that every 4 years the inflation rate of it is cut in half, and hence if the demand stays the same or increases, it goes up in price. Like that is pretty straightforward for most people to understand. So yeah, I think there's a good chance perhaps that this could be sort of a moment where the wider world sort of turns back to Bitcoin, maybe in a way that they didn't really do after the ETFs. Because I don't know about you guys. Did you sort of feel the silence was a bit deafening in the wake of those ETFs?
I mean, a little bit, but I also think that it's hard to imagine like there's a ton of people out there at this phase of the cycle, like before QE returns, before the halving, that if they didn't already have exposure to Bitcoin, that they were waiting for the spot ETF to get their allocation. Like it's like if you were that interested in Bitcoin, you probably would have had exposure via Bitcoin already. And if you didn't have exposure via Bitcoin, you could have had a proxy to it, right? You could have had like MicroStrategy or something like that, or you could have had miners. So it's not, I have to imagine a lot of people that were so focused on the spot ETF probably had some exposure already. But I suspect that the spot ETFs will be where a lot of flows come from, as we go back to looser monetary policy and more people are willing to take on more risk. There's actually one other chart I really wanted to quickly show. You can pull it up. This is your guys' favorite chart. It's the Ether Bitcoin chart. And I almost wonder if, do you guys remember how like the Ether Bitcoin chart topped out at the merge, back in like September of 2022? This pattern that the Ether Bitcoin pair has seems to be very, repetitive, right? Like it just keeps repeating the same pattern. I wonder if this sort of the purple circle that I've drawn here, where you can see these prior, I wonder if that corresponds to the halving, because it often is like these major big events where we see one of those blue chips surge against the other one, whether it's Ethereum surging against Bitcoin into the merge, or whether it's Bitcoin surging against ETH into the potential halving. So I know people are focused more on a spot ETF for Ethereum, And that is, sort of the narrative right now, especially with this move up. But I almost wonder if, the next 3 months we'll see Bitcoin take control again and it come back into this range.
Yeah. It's interesting as well that that you mentioned miners, Ben, because Rob, you were saying just before we went on air that in Texas is it right? There's a big freeze in Texas at the moment, and Bitcoin miners are having to shut down.
Yeah, go figure, right? I mean, in Puerto Rico we don't have that issue, but in Texas, every so many years they do. And I guess I was talking to friends. And I know in El Paso it was below freezing. I know Houston, Dallas, the same thing. So what's happening again is that this is the whole thing with the discussion about, well, Bitcoin takes so much power, and it takes so much power, and it's an ESG issue. But in reality, what miners have told me is they're like, look, we're using excess of energy, which gets wasted anyhow. So we put that into the government, which we put that into the counties and the cities, as otherwise it'll be lost. And then when that excessive supply, they really need that to turn it back on, we just shut down. And this is an example of what's happening right now. So because of the freeze, the electrical company, I think it's ESCOT, they say, look, you got to shut down, and we're going to use this electrical to divert to all the people that are having troubles. And when that happens, now you have a 25% reduction in the hash rate. So that actually would open up to other miners that can say, hey, thanks for shutting down. Now, hopefully this difficulty adjustment will come through and we actually start mining. So things are in balance pretty well. So I hate that argument when they say, hey, it's an ESG issue. It's really not. It's actually helping out a lot of different places, especially with excessive energy.
Yeah, it does feel like that narrative, Bitcoin uses as much energy as this, that, or the other country. It does feel like that is starting to change now, but it's always good to see, a story like that. It's like, this is a dynamic thing. This can react to circumstance. This is an industry that is trying its hardest to sort of fit in.
Right. No, I got to agree. But unfortunately, we'll have the Jamie Dimons and the Elizabeth Warrens. They'll trot out the old narratives, and then we have to come out here and correct them. And it's just an ongoing cycle until people just realize that they're morons, and that's where we're left.
Yeah. Well, we're getting there. I think the Jamie Dimon and Elizabeth Warren are morons camp sort of gets noticeably bigger every day. But there's still plenty of room in there, isn't there? The one thing I would mention about that, though, the miners in Texas, that does point to just how much hash power is concentrated there. If miners, 25% is no joke.
Yeah, it is. And we worry about centralization, and of course in China, but when it's in the United States, then you don't hear too many arguments from me, because that's just, unfortunately. Yeah. But remember, it's not so much the Bitcoin miners, it's the node operators, and they're the ones that really dictate a lot of things that are going on with Bitcoin. So just something to remember, even though Jamie Dimon thinks the exact opposite.
Well, Jamie Dimon's contribute. Yeah, he was sounding off. He's been sounding off at Davos, hasn't he? I think I posted something about that somewhere earlier today. It's just, how long has he had to figure it out, and he still hasn't. Anyhow, let's move on, gents. I want to ask you a burning question. We've seen this rally. Obviously, it's been a little flat post ETF, but we are still seeing those inflows to those ETFs. Is this rally that we've seen, is this another bear market rally, or are we really at the beginning of a new crypto bull market? Should we be getting excited, or do we still need to be a little circumspect, a little restrained? Ben, what are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, I think it's always good to consider what the downside risks are. I think let me pull up a chart. So here's the sort of the ROI to low, or ROI from the bear market low, from like the bear market years, your 2014, 2018, and 2022. And so if you look at like the current cycle compared to the last two, this is more or less where we have always been at this point in the cycle, right? And we're sort of below where we were last cycle, but we're actually still ahead of where we were the cycle before. And so, my thinking on this is that, it's worthwhile to be prepared for a potential downside. I mean, I think both of us, or all three of us, probably remember what it was like back in March of 2020 when, I think everyone was super bullish, and, the halving was only, 2 months away, and then the market absolutely melted down. Of course, that was, arguably a black swan. I don't think we should go into things thinking that things have to play out the exact same way they did last cycle. But I would say that I think it's always good to have a certain degree of caution when it comes to investing, especially in crypto, or especially in altcoins, right? Because I mean, for me, my crypto portfolio has basically just been mainly Bitcoin for over 2 years now. I've been skeptical of all Bitcoin valuations. I just think Bitcoin's taking back market share. So I've been more focused on that. Note that if there is sort of a cleansing in the market due to, like if there is an uninverted yield curve, which could come later this year, whatever it might be, or if the labor market finally starts to show weakness, Bitcoin can often recover a lot quicker out of those types of events than oftentimes altcoins can. Or at least, the altcoins can recover, assuming the Fed comes to the rescue, which they probably would, right? But the point is they tend to get hit harder than Bitcoin does in that type of environment. So, for me, when I think about like where we are in the cycle, I like to go back to this chart and just say, look, you can kind of see at this point in the last couple of cycles, price action got pretty boring up until another 3 months from now, which kind of puts us right around the halving, if you think about it. So I think the main risk that we have this time to consider is the inverted yield curve, right? I mean, this is something that I hate to say it, right? But everyone, it's just something that's there. We have this inverted yield curve still, and it's something that we've only really seen before larger downturns in markets, right? I mean, here's the 2007 yield curve. Here's the yield curve from pre.com, right? And then here's the one before the pandemic. I just look at it and say, well, is this time different? Is it different? And here's the thing. I mean, it's possible that it's not different. It's possible that it's possible that it stays inverted for another 6 months or another 12 months, right? Like it could stay like this for a long period of time. And then upon the uninversion is where things get more worrisome. So I think that's probably one risk to consider. I think that's probably the biggest risk to consider. It's not anything crypto specific. I think most of the crypto stuff has sort of taken care of itself over the last couple of years. I would argue that the main risk to be worried about is sort of a macro risk rather than a crypto specific risk. And one thing that I've really learned a lot is that it's better for people just to have a strategy and stick to it. I mean, Rob, I know Rob's mentioned a lot of times, at least for the altcoins, right? He's just going to DCA no matter what. Like, I mean, if prices drop, so be it. He'll just keep buying more. I've had the same view, but on Bitcoin, right? Like, it's okay. I mean, I have my position that I got. If we do get a big drop, I'll buy more, but I'm not going to sit here and worry about it every single day. But I would say that this is one of the larger risks in the market to consider, the inverted yield curve.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Rob, where are you on this? Are you kind of in broad agreement with Ben? Are we at the, obviously there are things to be wary of, and I think as well it's worth pointing out people like Arthur Hayes have been talking about potential thing. I think the unwinding of the reverse repo facility, the Fed's reverse repo facility, and the bank term funding program. There are things like this on the horizon. So, yeah, do you think we're maybe getting a little carried away with this sort of talk of of the bull market starting?
Well, I'll tell you this. We did a show last Thursday on my channel, and everybody was super pumped up, weren't they? Like, the ETFs, first day, it's going to be awesome. There's going to be so much coming in, bro, to the moon. Lambos, you name it. And then what happened? 24 hours later, we're like, well, that kind of sucked. After that, it was the same thing. And I got to tell you, we sit here and we talked about it. I said to Ben, I'll say this again. I'm glad that Ben brings a little bit of levity to this situation and just says, hey, look, there's some things that you need to consider. There's some downside risk. And I think without that ability to think to yourself, okay, it's not going to go to the moon. It's not going to go to Mars. Maybe there's a little bit of risk and I should really do a double take. I think that's the most important thing that you can do. Then, of course, if you do all those things, you're like, Pepe coin, YOLO, whatever. It's up to you, right? But it's good that we actually have that type of stance where people can say, okay, maybe this isn't so great. But in the long term, it doesn't really matter. There's 4 words that are the worst in finance. This time, it's different. And it seems like we're doing the same thing again and again and again. And I just want to share this one. This is a great tweet from a mutual friend of ours, Lady of Crypto. And she put this out. It was a long tweet, but it was really good just to kind of see like where we're at. And she lays it out perfectly. She says, look, market tops in 2017, the bull market peaked exactly 29 months before the halving. In 2021, it did the same thing. Now, I'm not saying it's going to do the exact same thing, but it is amazing how these things kind of line up. So again, this is going to 2018, 29 months again to the next halving, and we'll hit it. And I think we got like 92 days. Correct me in the comments section. So then we got that. And then she says this, hey, both the 2018 and 2022 bear markets lasted exactly 12 months. I thought it was going to last longer. I was wrong. And again, from the top to the bottom, 12 months. And we can even see like the cycle lows. This is going from the last in 2013 to 2015. It was 85%. And then in cycle 2, which is what I call cycle 2, from the top to the bottom, it took, roughly about a year or so. Yeah, December, 84%. And then this one, I think we're a little bit ahead of the game because it went from November 2021 to top. And then we thought, everybody, remember this? And this is the thing. Everybody said, that's it, bro. This is the last time you're going to get Bitcoin below 20K at June. And guess what? Wrong. It went, and it took a year. And again, like timing was impeccable. And actually it wasn't 84%, which would have put us to 10 or 12K. It was 77%. And again, I think we're ahead of the curve, but we're still in the same time frames. Same thing with Ethereum, cycle 2, cycle 3, a little bit less time frame. So then to finish this all up, it comes down to this. I don't know what's going to happen in the short term. In the long term, I'm thinking things are going to do pretty well. And she put this graph together, which says this is the time if you're looking to invest, not financial advice, but this is the Goldilocks time period of when some really big names came out. Like this was before and after the halving. Luna, July 2019. Unfortunately, hopefully you sold some. Matic, April 2019. Axie, April 2020. Solana, April 2020. Sandbox, August 2020. SHIB, August 2020. And Gala. But having said all this stuff together, how many of those didn't drop massively or get totally erased? So that's the whole thing with being an investor. It's not about how much you make, it's how much you can keep, because good luck getting out at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Wise words. And it is really, there is a real sort of sense of excitement, I think, bearing these, all these risks in mind. There is a lot of excitement at the moment in the markets. Lady of Crypto is absolutely right. There's some cool stuff being dropped. You've got airdrops going on left, right, and center. Okay, some of those may not turn out to be that great in the long run, but we are seeing awesome projects that people are now talking about. I mean, people are talking about the likes of Celestia and stuff being, absolutely huge in the near, in the not too distant future. And these things are dropping on us now, so to speak. So I think it's whether or not we're already in a bull market, it's definitely a time to be paying close attention. I think this is where it doesn't pay to take your eye off the ball. I think we could probably all agree on that.
Yeah, look, I think there's risks in both directions, right? There's always the downside risk. There's always the risk to the upside as well. And that's why it's good to be hedged, right? Either way, you don't have all your money in the market in case there is a larger pullback, like what we got last cycle just before the halving.
Yeah.
But if you don't have any position, then you run the risk of just simply getting left behind. So I think it's good to sort of be hedged either way and have a plan no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect.
Absolutely. Have a plan and stick to it. even if you do get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Okay, what that's Mike Tyson. I think everyone has a
Mike
plan
Tyson,
until
yeah.
they get punched
Yeah.
in the face. Like, I think that's a quote I see sort of more often than virtually any other. It's a great quote. It's funny that a guy, a boxer, has had as one of the most enduring quotes out there. I think, for investors everywhere, rather than some investing expert. Anyhow, so talking of all this interesting stuff that's happening at the moment, all these cool things going on. Are there any particular narratives, crypto narratives, that are on your guys' radar? And as a subset of that question, are there any specific projects within those narratives or niches that you're watching? Rob, do you want to start us off on this one?
Yeah, because that I always said it. I said it before. I'll say it again. I think that there's 3 narratives coming forward, and that is with the problems that are going on with centralized exchanges. I think DEXs will be a big play. So look for the DEX narrative, because right now, me as a U.S. citizen, it's very hard for me to get a lot of things, and I'm using DEXs constantly. When they upgrade and do really well, especially the Solana DEXs, like Jupiter, and I forgot the other one's name, but they're fantastic. They work, and I can just use them, and I can get the things that I want in and out, bing, bang, boom, done. So there's that one. AI, I think, is going to be the next big play, and there's a couple ones like Render. There's another one that's I've had featured on my show for a couple of months now, is Hypercycle, and they're coming through because it's not so much about AI, but it's the computational power that it takes to get AI to actually run effectively and smoothly. And that's a very expensive way to do things. But with Hypercycle, they can use your computational power from your computer. You can actually get paid in Hypercycle token, and then they can go from there. It's kind of like Theta but for AI, if that makes any kind of sense. And then of course the last one, Guy, I'm sorry to delve you into this horrible genre that I got your whole team involved into, but it's Flappy Bird, and this one. So if everybody knows, I'm one of the founders, and we actually purchased the IP rights. This was back in 2018. And we're going to launch the Flappy Bird game again, and we're going to launch on Web 2 first, because it just makes sense to us. So the game's going to be on Android and Apple. I sent this over to Guy and his team. I think, Guy, you made it to like 3, which is not too bad. 2. I made it to, I think it was 18, and then I think somebody in your office made it to like 17. We're going to roll this out into Web3. So the game's the same thing, staking and tokens, those type of things. But before we do that, we're going to have a competition between a lot of different communities. You probably should hear this about a lot of places. And we're going to run this for 4 weeks. And at the end, we're going to give away, it's a 10 million airdrop for everybody who participates. So more stuff coming out. I'll let everybody know the games are ready and available. It's a working product, and we'll go from there. I can't say much, honestly, because I'm the founder and legal-wise, but that's what's going on in my little world.
Okay. Yes, I can. Rob sent over access to the demo of Flappy Bird, and we had a play around with it in the office. I've never encountered something I'm so instantly bad at in my life. It was terrible, but it was kind of weirdly addictive. Like, I kept coming back. Back.
There is a reason that game launched. It was launched for 4 weeks. It had 90 million downloads, and it was yanked. And right now, even if you look at like the Google searches, like Axie Infinity has like 5,000 organic searches. Heroes Unchained has like 36,000. And then of course Flappy Bird, it still gets 1 million Google searches per month. So I know we're probably going to do well. And the whole thing we want to do is to introduce people from back to Flappy, but then also how Web3 works with our integrated wallet, and make it super simple so it's not so complex. And the chain that we're launching on, I can't even say that, but it's got a nice phone with it. That's all I can say.
Okay. All right. There's a clue for anyone who's been paying attention. Thanks, Rob. Ben, I know this may be a silly question to ask someone who's just said that their portfolio is made up mainly of Bitcoin, but are there any particular crypto narratives or niches that you're interested in, sort of longer term, that may contain altcoins that you might consider picking up in the future?
I like all the caveats.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think Rob mentioned some of them. There's also, did you mention gaming? I mean, you said Flappy Bird, so it's
Yeah,
basically
Web3 gaming. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think gaming is probably going to be pretty big in the next cycle. There probably could be some AI elements as well, as cryptocurrencies sort of try to attach themselves to that. I think I think a lot of that stuff might really pick up in terms of narratives after the halving, is my guess. Sort of expecting sometime after the halving, and we get all this other stuff behind us. I think a lot of those narratives could pick up quite a bit. So yeah, I mean, I don't really, I mean, beyond Bitcoin, the crypto I would be, and I mean, I do have small position. I mean, I've said before, like my portfolio is like 99% Bitcoin. It's not 100%. But I do have the other 1% in part. I mean, a lot of it's just ETH. I had converted a lot of my ETH back to Bitcoin, in the months leading up to and following the merge, around that time. So I'd be looking to, to get back into Ethereum sometime this year. Once I think that there's more evidence to suggest that the bleed on the Ether Bitcoin pair is over. And so once that happens, I think there could be a lot of narratives that emerge, just around Ethereum and all the things that go with that, right? Layer 2s, just DeFi. I think a lot of that stuff will pop back up. But until we get past the halving, I can't help but think that money will just rotate back to Bitcoin, in a few more months, right? I mean, I think like right now, obviously we just came off the spot ETF stuff, and Bitcoin has cooled down. We've seen Ether gain some of that market share back from Bitcoin, but I think it's probably just going to go back again the other way into the halving, and I think once it goes back that way again to Bitcoin, then on the other side of that is where those other narratives that you mentioned start to pick up. Because after the halving for Bitcoin, like that's going to be like, I'm not saying there's no other big narratives for Bitcoin, but after the halving, there just tends to be a pretty dry area for Bitcoin for the next like 6 months or so.
Yeah.
I could see a lot of those narratives that Rob mentioned picking up after the halving, and after eyes have finally turned away from Bitcoin. But it's like, we've seen just how many times these narratives, that we knew the spot ETF was coming, and yet a lot of people did not think that Bitcoin would take back a lot of that market share, right? And it did. It took back a lot, and now we know the halving is in literally 3 months. So perhaps the next 3 to 4 weeks are relatively boring in crypto. We could even get a pullback, potentially below 40K again, and then you have the halving narrative that's going to pop up, that's going to take market share. But I think that I think that I would just reiterate what Rob said after the halving. I think that a lot of those narratives that he mentioned will start to take more prevalence.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. One narrative I'll throw in, that we did a video on crypto narratives to watch a few weeks ago, which was a fascinating one to look at, to research. But we sort of missed out on DeepIn. I don't know if you guys have been sort of monitoring that at all. Decentralized physical infrastructure.
Yes.
And Masari did a report about it just recently, State of DeepIn 2024. That is an absolutely fascinating narrative to watch out for, because there are lots of cool projects building in it. You've got sort of decentralized wireless, so things like Helium, or decentralized cloud computing, things like Akash networks, things like that. Lots of interesting projects. But one of the points that this report makes, which I think is really important, is that one of the reasons why DeepIn could catch on, or could be, a big narrative to come, is because it doesn't involve a financial use case. Okay, you've got you've got incentives in the form of these tokens for providing running infrastructure or using networks, etc. But this isn't, it's not like you're not providing a financial service of any sort. So, and we're seeing so much pushback from regulators sort of all over the place. DeFi, I think, is being targeted in a lot of different jurisdictions. So I think DPIN could be a really interesting one to watch out for, not just because of utility, but I think also because of the fact that there is a lot more to crypto, I think, than just offering ways to do funny stuff with internet money. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like to think there's more to it than that anyway.
Yeah, I saw that Helium had they have a promotion. I think it's $20 a month, unlimited text and data and mobile service, which is, pretty great. I think they actually had a contract or a partnership with the University of Florida. So they rolled it out and it's actually working. So that's one of those that works pretty well. Rolled mobile, on Cardano in Africa, and they're rolling out in the United States. And then just like you said, like the different other ones that are out there, it is interesting. And if it pulls it off, it's like a real use case of where people can actually say, oh, that's actually has utility. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can do great things. It can help people. World Mobile is a good example, like connecting the unconnected. That was kind of one of the foundational things of crypto, wasn't it? Okay, banking the unbanked, but it's the same sort of thing. Bringing these services that us in the West take for granted and actually giving them to people who need them.
Well said.
Yeah, in a decentralized manner. Okay, let's move on to a little bit of a hot potato, perhaps for some people, but I want to touch on it anyway because it was the Iowa caucus recently, where Donald Trump obliterated the opposition and basically sort of sealed the Republican nomination. Anyhow, we've all seen that. DeSantis, Haley, and Vivek Ramaswamy, between them, couldn't even get close to him. So, and Vivek subsequently dropped out. Now, I think this was a big disappointment for a lot of people in crypto because he is quite clearly was the most pro-crypto of the Republican candidates, certainly, and I think arguably of all the candidates. So, and he was doing the rounds on sort of all the crypto podcasts recently. I don't know if you guys managed to listen to any of those, but he was really, really articulate, really knows his stuff, a very smart guy who knows about and understands crypto. So there is speculation that perhaps we could see more of him, and he could be Trump's running mate when Trump secures the nomination, which he basically already has. So firstly, have you guys, obviously you guys are US based, I'm just hearing stuff from across the pond. Do you think those rumors of Vivek possibly being Trump's running mate are true? And would that be positive for crypto? Ben, have you heard anything on this at all, or are you sort of above all this?
I'll defer to Rob on this. I don't know.
Why do you do that to me, Ben? Why do you do that to me?
I'm not going to. There's a few things I don't talk about, and politics is one of them. So I will stick.
Fair enough.
That's why Ben's the smartest out of all three of us. That makes total sense. And on that note, let me talk about politics, and then later we'll talk about religion. So with this one, with I'll make this quick. So I want to do a bunch of Q&A. Vivek is very articulate. He's great. I would love to have seen him, in the White House. And he's very pro Bitcoin, pro crypto, and everything else. He's like a dream for us. And as far as like libertarians as well. The thing is, I guess the question is Trump going to use him as a VP? The question that has to be is, what does Vivek bring to the table that Trump really doesn't? So like they're kind of like the same person. I know people will say, well, it's an obvious choice, but look at the last one when Trump won in 2016. It was him and Mike Pence, and people were like, why do you pick Mike Pence? It was because it was between Mike Pence and Newt Gingrich. When they did a background check for Newt, a little story for everybody, Donald Trump said, he makes me look like Cinderella, so we're going to pass on him. And the reason why they went with Mike Pence is because he was a governor of Indiana. And he was also friends and friendly with the different governors around there in the Rust Belt, the Ohio, the West Virginia type of places. So he added things onto it, and also the evangelical vote. So that's
Right.
just history going in that direction. To say that Vivek wouldn't be is a definite shoo-in, I don't think is true. I think it'd be great, but they may go outside somewhere else. But again, Vivek did so well. He came from nowhere and he got almost 9% of the vote for the Iowa caucus. So he'll be in the running. I don't know if he's going to be a senator at some point, but he's definitely a bright spot, especially for crypto. I like him.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I mean, party politics aside, it's refreshing to see a candidate who, knows about crypto, but isn't just sort of paying lip service to the idea. He actually understands it and he can talk about it. And yeah, I thought he came across as a really impressive and articulate person. So I doubt we've seen the last of him. Okay, let's drop that hot potato and move on to the Q&A. I've been sort of selecting a few things that have jumped out. Here's an interesting one from Matthew, saying the irony, of banks being able to buy BTC on the 1st of January 2025 is huge. Do you guys think the price impact of this will also be huge? Ben, Rob?
Ben can take that one. I took the other one, Ben. You can take this one.
This is, I should clarify, Ben, this is central banks. So from the 1st of January 2025, central banks will be able to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheets.
I'm just trying to imagine Powell coming out.
Oh yeah, close the effing door, and now we just bought Bitcoin. Yeah.
Imagine if they had Bitcoin in a bull market, and then the bear market starts, and they're like, "All right, we're going to now reduce the size of our Bitcoin balance sheet." I mean, like, I feel like a lot of times when these narratives come or these things come out, like, it could be important, but it often takes a lot longer for it to actually become important. It's like the spot ETF, right? Like, yeah, like it's a big deal long term. Probably there's going to be a lot of money that flows into Bitcoin in those ETFs over the next 10 years. But in the short term, the price of Bitcoin dropped 10%, right? So I'm guessing, I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion about something like that. I don't think that the minute they're able to, central banks are going to just start buying Bitcoin hand over fist.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it can't eventually happen, but I think a year from now might be a little bit too optimistic.
Yeah. Of course, the Fed wouldn't necessarily need to buy any Bitcoin because it could just go to the U.S. Marshals Service and the FBI and say, hand it over. Because, I think the American government in one form or another has got a pretty big stack of sats. So
this is true. That is very true.
Maybe it'll just be like, okay, transfer to the It's every other central bank that needs to try and front run them. Rob, do you think on the 1st of January 2025, Powell will put out a tweet with laser eyes?
That would be the ideal, and I expect that to not happen. But I mean, if it did, it'd be great. And even if we do, like any central bank does it, it's just a great narrative. Just like I said before, even if the spot ETF didn't get approved, the narrative's there, and we can kind of roll with that. So if anybody that does it, great for us.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I say all this, but last cycle, it's not like I went into it thinking that a country was going to announce they were buying Bitcoin. So I guess something to keep in mind, right? Like, you never really know. You never know.
It's true. Good point.
Yeah. It could be the next natural step. You've got spot ETFs now. Next thing is central banks. Seriously, that is something to watch out for. That is something that a lot of people have, I think, have not taken into account yet. And we're less than a year away from it. So keep your eyes peeled. A few other questions. Hajami has written in, good evening from Bhutan, the happiest place on earth. Are you guys aware that Bhutan is, as a nation state, is actually mining Bitcoin? Have you heard this one?
I have not. Well, fantastic. More people to do that. I'm happy.
Yeah. So, we talk about central banks getting it. Already countries are doing it. Bhutan is in the Himalayas and has basically a lot of free energy because I think it's got loads of hydropower because of all the water, sort of coming down off the mountains, and they're using it to mine Bitcoin. And I think this was only discovered because I think it was because they were investors in Celsius and they were named and their sovereign wealth fund or something was named in the bankruptcy proceedings. And someone went, "Hang on a sec, that's Bhutan." So
well, thankfully, one good thing came out of Celsius. So
yeah. I looked up how to get to Bhutan. It's not easy, just so you know. So if you're planning your next holiday there, don't bank on it. But once they've mined a few more Bitcoins. Okay, there were quite a few comments about Bhutan actually, so I'm glad we've managed to cover that. Homestead says, "Guy, bring up meme coins, please." Okay, meme coins. There we are. Here's another question. Matthew, I think Matthew had a question earlier as well. But yes, how entertained were you by Jamie Dimon suggesting Satoshi will reprogram BTC to produce more coins? The biggest indicator yet that he just doesn't get it. That was a bit of a head scratcher, wasn't it? Did you guys see that? I think that was this morning.
Yeah. It's always hilarious when people are anti-Bitcoin fundamentally. And then you listen to them, you try to hear what they have to say, and then they say something that you're like, oh, they have no clue what it is they're talking about, And it's kind of like when Congress is, they're talking about crypto, and it's like, all right, well, can you define, what some of these terms are for us, right? Can you do you know what Bitcoin is? Do you know what Ethereum? Do you know what DeFi means? Do you know what Web3? Did you know what that stuff means? My guess is that most of them probably couldn't even tell you what it is, but they're here to help regulate it. It's always a good reminder that a lot of people that are critical about it fundamentally, honestly, don't even know what it is.
No, it's true. It's true, but it's like at one point, it's because I talked this in the show yesterday. At one point, it's ridiculous, but on the other point, it is, that there are going to be people that are going to hear that message from Jamie Dimon, and not because, let's be honest, nobody knows, or not everybody knows that Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan are heavily fined because of precious metal spoofing and all the different things they do in their banks, and they're going to hear that and go, oh, well, the banker just said that it's illicit activity, it's for drug trafficking and sex trafficking and cartels, and I don't like that, so I'm going to stay away from it, even though there's these other options out there. And that's, I think, what we're going to have to overcome to educate people. And that's, I think, where it comes down to, because you got the Warrens, you got the Peter Schiffs, and everybody else out there is saying it's trash, even though they've been saying that for 13 years. And I feel sorry for the people that never got in because of those narratives. But
yeah. Be careful who you listen to, folks. Okay, a few other comments that came through. 96 days until the halving. Apparently, we'll take you at your word, Crypto KJ. So just over 3 months. I enjoyed this one, Rob, when you were talking about the chain that you couldn't name, that you were launching Flappy Birds on. It had a phone. I saw that one.
Exactly. Ethereum has a phone, and and another thing, like Ben brings up Ethereum. And what he's talking about as far as in a portfolio, Ethereum is a large part of my portfolio too. And the layer twos probably do pretty well. But Ethereum as a phone, I think would be a disaster, especially with all the gas prices.
Yeah. Vitalik, if you're watching, don't do a phone, please. I'm sure it wasn't on the roadmap, but anyhow. Here's an interesting one from Master D. He feels like the halving will not have any effect this time round. Everything depends on interest rates. That's a hot take. Do you guys agree with that?
I mean, we probably will go back to lower interest rates, later this year. So, and it's funny because it seems like everything kind of lines up, right? We go back to lower rates around the halving, and then we spend the next 2 years after that figuring out if it was lower rates or the halving that caused what came next,
No.
I mean, it's probably a combination of both, honestly. I mean, I think the halving brings people to the space. It's a great narrative for sure. It gets more eyes into the market. I've seen some people, some people on Twitter who have not held Bitcoin before say they're getting a position, just in case. So I do think the halving has some effect, but I also think monetary policy has an effect as well. I think that it would be foolish to say that the Fed printing all that money in 2020 didn't have an effect on, and going back to 0% interest rates. Like it'd be silly to think that did not have an effect at all.
Exactly.
So it's probably a combination of both. But I imagine no matter what side you're on, you're going to find evidence over the next year to support your view, right? Like, if there is a larger market move where Bitcoin takes out the all-time highs within the next 1 to 2 years, it's probably going to be after the halving, and it's probably going to be when we're at looser monetary policy. And so no matter what your bias is, you'll probably be able to say, look, I was right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is the most important thing. Okay, I enjoyed this one from David as well. Going back to the Ethereum phone would cost $100 a text message.
That's pretty good, and not too far off. Oh, shit! I'll be right there.
Earthquake over there, Rob.
There's an earthquake. I think it just dropped. Sorry about that.
His Ethereum phone has just blown up.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a bit of unforeseen drama. Okay, last one, and then we'll call it a day. Have you guys been following the Coinbase SEC case? There was they were in court yesterday. Have you guys heard what was discussed there?
Yeah, essentially it kind of went like this. The SEC Coinbase wants to dismiss this case totally because they're saying that we're not selling on registered securities. And the SEC is saying that yes, they are. And the judge on the case, Leila Fillet or something like that, she said that the arguments that the SEC is making really doesn't stand in this present day and age. And she pretty much said that, look, the Howey test had a good run, but that was 90 years ago. 90 years ago. So we really need to kind of update that and let Congress kind of move forward. And then the SEC got stumped because the Coinbase legal team, Paul Granath, I think that's his name, he brought it up and said, well, look, if you're going to say that everything is a security, let's take a look at trading cards and Beanie Babies. Prove to us right now that those are not securities in the way that you define as the Howey test. And they couldn't do it. And the judge kind of had to ask him, like, this is uncharted territory, what you're talking about. And you're asking me to do too much of a broad decision. And if you can't prove that Beanie Babies and trading cards aren't securities, then what can we say about everything else? So unless you want me to say that the SEC is in charge of everything, which is not going to happen, you have to prove to me the other parts. So it's looking pretty good for us right now. And that would be another big L for the SEC.
They've been stacking those up.
We stack sats, they stack L's. What are you going to do?
Yeah, the SEC's terrible run of form continues, and it's great to see. We'll end with this one. That crash earlier was Matthew thinking that maybe Ben's cardboard desk had finally given way, but Ben, I trust it's all intact and holding up.
Strong as ever.
Nice.
Awesome. Like Bitcoin dominance. Okay, gents, that's enough for today. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you everyone for watching. We will be back next week on Ben's channel.
Yeah.
On Into the Cryptoverse. So enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks,
Ben,
everybody.
Rob, thanks very much. Okay.